صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. صلى الله وسلم عليك وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين. ما خاب والله من تمسك بكم وأمنا من لجأ والتجأ إليكم. يا ليتنا يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم أرنا الطلعة الرشيدة والغرة الحميدة واكحل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه وعجل اللهم فرجه وسهل اللهم مخرجه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه. قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أم كنتم شهداء إذ حضر يعقوب الموت إذ قال لبنيه ما تعبدون من بعدي قالوا نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق إلها واحدا ونحن له مسلمون. Qazwini, you're gathering with a remembrance of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. As a gift to the soul of Rasulullah and his honorable and purified progeny, and as a gift to the soul of Sayyidati wa Mawlati al-Banin, recite the second salawat. For Allah to shower onto this gathering with His infinite mercy and compassion, and to hasten the reappearance of Sayyidina wa Mawlana Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, recite the third salawat with the loudest of your voices. Oprah Winfrey, in her bestseller, has many interesting stories. However, I believe the most fruitful and eye-opening of the stories within the book is when she says, I was extremely wealthy and successful. People all over the world knew me. And I purchased the top pent floor at a skyrise in Chicago. I had my own telepad. This was the most secure building in the world. She had her own security. The building had surveillance 24/7. She says I would go home exhausted, tired, and I wouldn't be able to fall asleep. Every single night I would toss and turn in bed. Not because there was something stopping me from falling asleep. It was because I was afraid to sleep. She said on many nights, I would call that one person, her personal secretary, and say, let's find a way to sneak out of the building. We'd sit in a car, drive to a neighboring hotel. I would check into that hotel, and as soon as my head hits the pillow, I'd fall asleep. I kept telling myself, this is due to the fact that at the hotel, nobody knows I'm there. So I feel safe. Since years passed, and I kept doing this several times a week, leaving my extremely luxurious home, my bed, my comfort, and checking into a hotel. And it's something that's stuck in the back of my mind the entire time. It says until I hosted a psychiatrist, Dr. Perry, into the show. And Dr. Perry started speaking about childhood trauma and how we do not feel the effects of childhood trauma until we're full-grown adults. Sometimes when we're in our 40s and 50s. It says, he explained how childhood trauma is stored in the back of our minds in a subconscious way. And every time we feel the slightest hint of threats, there are alarms that are triggered in our mind. We may not even have a correct recollection of what has happened to us in our childhood, but we will begin to suffer. She said he continued to speak. I no longer could pay attention to him. I was thinking of myself. And I had a moment of realization, a great moment of realization. She says this could be the greatest moment of realization in her entire life. She says automatically, I began to think of my childhood. Oprah, possibly one of the wealthiest, most successful women in American history, was born into a home of poverty to a point where her mother, being a maid, a housemaid, would only make $50 a week. And when Oprah was born, she took Oprah to her grandmother and said, I cannot afford an extra mouth to feed. Take care of her. So she never grew up with her mother. She always saw her grandparents. She says, I would share a room with my grandma. My grandfather had dementia. She says, one night, I was 5 years old, I was sleeping in the bed, and my grandfather, who had dementia, walked out of his bedroom in the middle of the night, and I could hear the noise of my grandfather approaching my bedroom, our bedroom. He arrived to my grandmother, who was completely knocked out, sleeping, and he started choking her. Choking her to a point that she was about to die. A 5-year-old child is going to panic. So she said, I did whatever I could, and my grandmother survived, and she ran out of the house, and she called Cousin Henry. Apparently there was a Cousin Henry that lived as a neighbor. And she says, Oprah says, I remember Cousin Henry took a very long time to arrive. And I was wondering, where is this guy? Why is he taking so long? And when he did arrive, it just happened so that Cousin Henry was a blind man. He couldn't do much. What we did was, the next day we changed the locks. We put locks on that bedroom just to make sure that if he does it again, he's not going to get inside the bedroom. She says at 5 years old, every night when I was sleeping with one eye opened. What if he comes back? What if somehow he opens the door, and what if he chokes me or my grandma? Until I left my grandmother's home, until my grandfather passed away, I lived with this fear every single night. And this fear comes to hunt her. Well in her 40s and 50s, as she is one of the most successful women in American history. Every year, brothers and sisters, 130 million children are born into this world. Some of them are born into luxury. Some of them are born into poverty. Some of them are born into the warmth of the arms of their parents. And some of them, from that moment, experience neglect and abuse. Some of them are planned and welcomed, and some of them are considered mistakes and rejected. What we know for a fact is that those early days, those early months, those early years will remain for us for the rest of our lives. They will shape our identity. They will make us who we are. They will become an inseparable part of our existence. What we know for a fact is that childhood trauma is real. And tonight, when we gather here to commemorate this great lady, Ummul-Baneen, Fatima bint Hizam al-Kulabiyya, this honorable woman, I ask myself, what is it that's meant to be discussed? What would please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while we commemorate such a grand name in our community? What was she known for? Fatima bint Hizam al-Kulabiyya, al-Banin, what was she known for? She was known for one thing. She was able to give birth and nurture and develop and host 4 sons that made history on the sands of Karbala. She was able to develop those 4 individuals and put them at the service of the Imam of her time. A little bit of history and background on Fatima Baneen. I don't want to speak about her entire life, but I want to give you a glimpse of several of the most monumental aspects of her life. About 20 years old, give or take, while she was 20 years old, a decade after the martyrdom of the lady Fatima Zahra, Amir al-Mu'mineen goes inside the masjid of Rasulullah in Medina. I want you to pay attention to this, as if you're looking at this whole movie, at this whole scenario, so that you comprehend and relive those moments. He goes inside the masjid of Rasulullah. They say Aqil, who was senior to him by 20 years, Aqil, his brother, who was senior to Amir al-Mu'mineen by 20 years, would sit inside the masjid of Rasulullah, and he would have a carpet in front of him, and people would come and sit across from Aqil, and they would speak to him. Why? What was so special about Aqil, the brother of Amir al-Mu'mineen? كان عالما بأنساب العرب. People would go to him, they say, Aqil, I want to marry my son. What qualities are you looking for? Those are the qualities I'm looking for. He would write it down. He would say, come back in a week. Then he would say, go and approach the house of Hajj Fulan, this person. His daughter is suitable for you. He knew the bloodlines. He knew the family trees. He knew the traits. You might be surprised. But this is what technology can do for us today. Today, if you do your DNA, they tell you exactly where you're from, what traits you have. You're more likely to have diabetes. You're more likely to be lazy or less likely to be whatever. Aqil had that. So people would ask him, I want my son, my daughter is being approached by this young man. Should I give him my daughter's hand in marriage or not? And Aqil would say, give me some time. Then he would tell them, well, those are the traits of this family. Those are the traits of this tribe. The decision is yours. Amir al-Mu'mineen suddenly walks into the masjid of Rasulullah, and he sits across from Aqil, his own brother. This is a public event. While he could have called Aqil, my brother, come to my house. He goes and he sits across from Aqil. And he says, Aqil, انظر لي امرأة ولدتها الفحولة من العرب. I want a woman. Now, usually when men look for a wife, they want somebody who is, as far as looks, as far as obedience, as far as her being smart. Amir al-Mu'mineen looks for a quality that people look for in a man. He says, I want you to find me a wife that comes from the bravest of lineage. Usually people don't look for bravery is not a quality that a man looks for usually when finding a wife. Amir al-Mu'mineen leaves all the other qualities and he says, I want her to be from the bravest of lineage of the Arabs. And right away, Aqil just gives him the answer. He says, عَلَيْكَ بِبِنْتِ حُزَامِ الْكُلَابِ. Huzam al-Kulabi has a daughter. She's your only option. She's the best option. And then he gives a little history and background of the Kulabi tribe. And Amir al-Mu'mineen goes and approaches this young woman. She's in her early 20s, give or take. They say that the night before she had seen a great man approach her, and when he approached her, she saw that the moon fell in her lap. And she woke up and she told her father, I saw this dream, I don't know what it means. And that same day, Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Mawla al-Muwahhideen, Asadullahi wa Asadu Rasulih, approaches the house of Baneen, Fatima bint Hizam al-Kulabiyya. Of course, this is Amir al-Mu'mineen. She accepted. The marriage took place. Amir al-Mu'mineen welcomes this young woman in her home, in his home. Listen to this, brothers. This is very important. The first moment Amir al-Mu'mineen walks into her presence, he says, Fatima, this was her name. Laki indi haja. Ask for what you wish. You have a haja with me. I will grant it for you. It could be that Amir al-Mu'mineen was testing her as well. She says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, my haja to you is that you do not call me Fatima. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, why? You have a beautiful name. Why do you not want me to call you Fatima? She says, because Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, the way that you say Fatima, the connection and the bond that you have with your Fatima, that's something sacred. That is something special. And if your children and your family hear you say this name, it may hurt their feelings. So I want you to give me a nickname and use this nickname. Don't call me Fatima in front of your children. I don't want to break their hearts. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, then your nickname shall be what? al-Banin, the mother of the boys. And the next day she said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, take me to your children. She was the same age as Sayyidah Zainab. The children of Amir al-Mu'mineen were not children at the time. Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Sayyidah Zainab, Kulthum. Amir al-Mu'mineen went to introduce Fatima bint Huzam al-Kulabiyya, al-Baneen, to his family, to his children. As soon as she entered, this is what she told them. She said, listen, I am not your father's wife. I am your servant. I am your khadim. Consider me your servant. Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, you are Sayyidi Shababi Ahl al-Jannah. I am your servant. I am the servant of your father. I am the servant of this family. And in the year 26 after Hijrah, Allah granted them their first child. Listen to this. Abu al-Fadl Abbas. Abu al-Fadl Abbas, when he was born, Amir al-Mu'mineen was again inside the masjid. Masjid Rasulullah. Qambar went and he whispered in his ears. He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Allah has granted you with a child and they are waiting for you at home. Amir al-Mu'mineen left the masjid. He came out. The child had not opened his eyes. This is in the biography of Abu al-Fadl Abbas. When he was born, he had not opened his eyes. His mother passed him out of the room into the hands of whom? His brother al-Imam al-Hussein. They say that as soon as Imam al-Hussein took this child, he opened his eyes in the eyes of al-Imam al-Hussein. And Imam al-Hussein had him. He was holding him until the father comes. Amir al-Mu'mineen comes, he hands over his brother to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen looks at him. He's a very beautiful child. And he was wrapped. So Amir al-Mu'mineen opens the wrapping. He takes out the hands of Abu al-Fadl Abbas and he begins to kiss his hands. And then he begins to cry. al-Banin, she says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, is there something wrong with my son's hands? Why are you crying? Amir al-Mu'mineen wipes his tears and he says, those hands will be kept for a specific day, for a special day. Baneen, this is how a mother, I believe, you know, when Amir al-Mu'mineen asked Aqil to find him a brave wife, Aqil told him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, oh my brother, why do you not want a brave wife? What's bravery got to do with women? He says, لِتَلِدَ لِي وَلَدًا أَدَّخِرُهُ لِلشَّدَائِدِ. I want her to give birth to a son that I will protect for a day of calamity. I believe the first marriage in history to bring offspring so that they can aid the cause of Imam al-Hussein was the marriage of Amir al-Mu'mineen, his father. Amir al-Mu'mineen specifically got married so that he can have children so that they can aid Hussein. Let me repeat this so you understand what I'm trying to tell you. Amir al-Mu'mineen was married so that he can have children, so that those children will aid the cause of Sayyid al-Shuhada, al-Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. This is the greatest inspiration for marriage. Don't tell me, well, I want to get married because This is the greatest reason for marriage. This is the greatest cause for marriage, for you to have children dedicated to the cause of Imam al-Hussein, to be servants of Imam al-Hussein. And Amir al-Mu'mineen was the founder of this ideology. Children were born. First, second, third, fourth. The fourth one was born in the 40th year after the Hijrah, the year of the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. And al-Banin, from the very beginning, taught her children that Hassan and Hussein are not brothers. They are masters. Do not call them brother. Abu al-Fadl, you do not call Imam Hassan brother. Abu al-Fadl, you do not call Imam Hussein brother, but you call him Sayyidi wa Mawlai. They are your masters. Do not treat them like your ordinary brother. This is what they grew up with. The understanding of the Imams of their time and the role that a mother can play in bringing her children closer to the Imam of their time. Now, the Battle of Siffin occurred. Amir al-Mu'mineen took Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein to the Battle of Siffin. Baneen came to him. She said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Abu al-Fadl, he is very sad. He's crying. He says, why? He says, he's taking my other brothers and he's leaving me. Abu al-Fadl was a teenager, barely a teenager. So Amir al-Mu'mineen says, son, are you ready to go to battle? He says, of course I am. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen said, then you join us. In Siffin, Muawiyah had summoned a man that had 7 boys. And they were known to be deadly warriors. They were summoned in special battles to annihilate the enemy. So he called him. He said to him, I want you to join Siffin. And this man, he didn't take sides. He took the sides of money. You give me money, me and my sons will join. So he said, how much does it take for you and your sons to join the Battle of Siffin? They bargained a bit. They reached an amount. Muawiyah gave the amount and he said to him, I want you to annihilate Ali. He says, you want me to annihilate Ali? My sons will annihilate Ali. I don't need to get into battle. I have 7 sons. They will annihilate him. The battle, before it began, this man called out, Ya Ali, come and challenge my sons. Tradition say Abu al-Fadl was sitting, fixing his boots. Barely a teenager, Amir al-Mu'mineen looked at him, he said, son, are you ready? He says, yes, I am. He said, come. Gave him the sword, gave him the spear, wore the amama. He said, but you have to mask yourself. Do not unmask yourself until I tell you, Abu al-Fadl. I said, okay. Abu al-Fadl went. Barely a teenager. History says one after the other. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7 of his sons were murdered by the sword of Abu al-Fadl. As soon as the 7 were killed, thinking that Amir al-Mu'mineen was their killer, Amir al-Mu'mineen comes galloping with his horse from the back. Say, who's this guy then? Who's this masked person? We thought the whole time that it is Ali ibn Abi Talib who's slaughtering our sons, those brave warriors. Who is this young man? Amir al-Mu'mineen then said, Ya Abu al-Fadl, unmask yourself. when he unmasked himself and they saw his face, they said, إِنَّهُ قَمَرُ بَنِي هَاشِمٍ. Because of that face, that luminous face full of light that he had, Abu al-Fadl Abbas. Being a teenager, he proved himself in the battle of Siffin. He made a name for himself in the battle of Siffin as a warrior, as a brave man. And Amir al-Mu'mineen would train his children. And another wave of ambush, Amir al-Mu'mineen calls Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, his other son. He says, Ya Muhammad, أعر الله جمجمتك وارمي العدو ببصرك واعلم أن النصر من عند الله. He gives him a line that teaches him how to be a warrior. He says, first of all, أعر الله جمجمتك. Look up. In battle, never look down. وارمي القوم ببصرك. And look at your enemies dead in the eye. Do not be afraid. Fight, do what you need to do, but وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ النَّصْرَ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. That victory will come to you from Allah. If you fight on the side of Allah, Allah will enable you victory. Abu al-Fadl, this was his development. Now, when we gather in a night like this, remembering al-Banin, remembering Abu al-Fadl Abbas, he has another meaningful nickname. History says that one day Imam al-Hussein told him, Ya akhi, ya Abu al-Fadl, I am thirsty. And Imam al-Hussein was inside the masjid of Rasulullah. So Abu al-Fadl ran back. He got water. He was about to bring the water to Imam al-Hussein. He tripped and the water spilled. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he saw this. He witnessed this. He began to cry. Abu al-Fadl was sad that he couldn't bring the water. His father says to him, Ya Abu al-Fadl, anta saqi al-'atash. He gave him this responsibility that you shall be the one that fetches water. Imagine the development of this child. When we gather on a night like this, remembering Abu al-Fadl, remembering his mother, what is our duty? Our duty is to look into our families, into the most sacred institution in the religion of Islam, and create families that produce the likes of Abu al-Fadl. Produce daughters that produce daughters like the likes of Al-Banin. Mothers like Al-Banin. Brothers like the brothers of Abu al-Fadl Abbas. This is our duty. There is nothing, brothers and sisters, that pleases Allah more than a family and a unit dedicated to Allah, dedicated to Rasulullah, dedicated to the Ahl al-Bayt. بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه. Houses where Ahl al-Bayt, the Quran and Islam is remembered and they're in abundance. This is the example of a house in Islam, a family in Islam. And I began discussing the story of Oprah. And I began telling you how real it is if we suffer from childhood trauma. And I want to say this before I continue with my talk. Sometimes you'll come across people who are a little different. It could be your brother, it could be your sister, it could be your spouse, it could be your cousin. It could be somebody you love. And they may make mistakes. Or they may act in very strange ways in specific circumstances. How do you understand that? You understand it through their childhood. Sometimes if you make a mistake, try to fixing that mistake right there and then is not going to be what resolves the issue. You have to trace back until you find the source of the problem. try to resolve your problem at its core, 90% of the time it will take you back to your childhood. 90% of the time it will take you to the suffering of trauma in your childhood. This is a fact. Do not run away from it. Accept it and work on it. And know that as a parent, you have a responsibility to create a safe haven for your children. Let me give you another example. In the same book, Oprah talks about a young man by the name of Jesse. Jesse is born into a family of multi-generational child trafficking. It does not get worse than that. Literally, I mean, this is the biggest disaster. By the age 5, this child had been trafficked so much that he was in police custody. The police took him and put him in a foster home. So automatically, you know what kind of trauma this kid grew up with until the age 5. And then he goes to a foster home and he thinks he's getting a break there. Well, guess what? He wasn't. Because of his childhood trauma, because he didn't have parents taking care of him, obviously he wasn't your average normal child. The foster father would put this 5-year-old in a chicken coop outside the house so that he can discipline him. In the cold winter, he would strip him from his clothes and put him in the chicken coop. Jesse tried to run away several times. He couldn't until one day he did manage to run away. He ran away wearing just boxer shorts. Running for his life. The deputy sheriff, this is a real story. Deputy sheriff said, "Hey, what are you doing? You little kid running in the street, boxer shorts, what's going on?" He says, "I'm running away from my foster parent. He's abusive. He's hitting me. He's making me sleep in the chicken coop." He said, "Oh, really? Sit down." Takes him right back to the foster parent. The foster parent beats that kid so much that he has a concussion. So they take him to the hospital, and then he's removed from the foster parent home. He's put into another home. He's taken care of. He develops a nice character. He grows up. He goes to school. Now he's in high school. He's getting straight A's. Straight A's. Good kid. He gets a math teacher in high school. This math teacher suddenly walks next to Jesse, just walking around. Jesse gets up and starts beating the math teacher. Beating him until he's bleeding. I mean, he distorts his face. Obviously, they take Jesse to the principal's office. "Jesse, what did you do?" "Why?" He says, "I don't know." "Was he mean to you?" "No." "Did he say something to you?" "No." "Are you failing the class?" "No." "Why did you do this?" "I don't know." "Are you going to do it again?" "No, absolutely not." "Please give me another chance." "All right, we'll give you another chance." A week later, the same thing happens. Jesse gets out of his chair and starts beating the math teacher again until he's bleeding. They expel him from the school, put him in a special program, and that's when Dr. Perry comes in and starts asking him questions. Pay attention to this. Until he narrows down to one possibility. What is that possibility? He goes to the foster parent, visits the foster parent, then goes to the math teacher, and he draws this final conclusion. What is it? The foster parent and the math teacher were using the same deodorant. This is the subconscious mind. Look at what Allah has created. Allah has created this brain so that a small scent would trigger our brain to go into a protective mode. This kid didn't even know what he was doing. If you see some people acting strange in specific circumstances, give them the benefit of the doubt. Don't jump to conclusions. In Islam, sadaqah is not just you giving money to people. If you want the real form of sadaqah, if you have a real form of offering to give from your emotions. Give from your time. Give from your energy. Listen. This is what it means to save a life. To help a human being. And there is nothing that makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy than you spending some quality time to save a person, to save a human. Because ultimately then you will also save their family. And you will save their children. And you will save their marriage. And we live in a very strange time, brothers and sisters. We live in a time that the institution of family itself is in jeopardy. We live in a time where we've all heard of this gender neutrality, non-binary genders. So this kid can choose to be a boy in the morning, a girl at night, and so on and so forth. I don't want to get into that too much tonight. And this confusion starts at a very early time at school. It's in the movies, it's in the cartoons, it's everywhere. And this all goes back to the lack of devotion towards the institution of family. How do we protect our families? The definition of a family is being misinterpreted in our societies. While Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the greatest institution is in Islam, it's not the Kaaba. It's not a masjid. It's the family. من تزوج فقد أحرز نصف دينه. Through marriage, you're guaranteed half of your faith, half of your iman. So indeed, it's an act of worship. And they say that's an act of the fuqaha. Listen to this is a delicate point. The fuqaha, they say, why is it that when I pray in a place that is ghasbi, I usurp a place that doesn't belong to me, and I pray there, why is that salah not accepted? I go and I, God forbid, steal this jacket, I wear it, then I stand in the front of the Qibla, Allahu Akbar. They say this salah is batil. Why? Because this is ghasbi. What is ghasbi? It's been usurped. It's been taken without permission. It's been stolen. Why? What does this shirt, what does this place that I have not gotten permission for, I have stolen, have to do with my salah? Salah is one thing, ghasb is another thing. This is a lot of people will tell you that. Everything, no, we separate. Allah says there's no such thing. It's all connected. Why? The ulama have said, they say because you cannot say qurbatan ila Allah, seek nearness to Allah with something that is repelling you from Allah. By you usurping a place, a house, a property, clothes, money, this is taking you away in a completely different direction from Allah, and salah is meant to be qurbatan ila Allah, take you towards Allah. He says, you're using the wrong vehicle, man. This is not going to take you to Allah. This is going to take you somewhere else. We have to redefine marriage for ourselves. Why do we even get married? What is the purpose behind marriage? Some people, their definition of marriage, it is the wrong reason for them to be married. And I always tell people, if this is the reason why you're getting married, please don't. Hold off marriage and marry for the right reasons. Yes, getting married early in Islam is good, but for the right reasons, the right motives, not the wrong ones. What are the wrong ones? I'm bored. Bored. Feel lonely, I want to get married. Today, statistics show that 6 out of 10 married people feel lonely. What are you going to do then? In fact, when you're married and you're lonely, you're more miserable. Because as soon as you say, I feel lonely, they say, what are you talking about? You have kids. You're married. But this is a fact. The Quran talks about it. The Quran, solution to everything, especially social issues. Allah gives the example of Zainab bint Jahsh and the adopted son of Rasulullah, Zayd. Zayd and Zainab bin Jahsh were married. Now Zayd grew up in the house of Rasulullah. Zainab was a very good mu'min woman. Zayd, the same thing. Because sometimes when there is family conflict, they say, well, one of them has got to be on the side of shaitan. One of them is a bad guy. One of them doesn't have iman. One of them doesn't have faith. No, that's not the case. Sometimes both of them have iman. Both of them have faith. Both of them are good people. Both of them, inshallah, will go to Jannah. They just can't live with each other. And this example is in the Quran. Married and miserable. Married and lonely. With two good people. Zayd would come to Rasulullah. Ya Rasulullah, I don't want to live with her. Zainab would come. Ya Rasulullah, I don't want to live with him. Rasulullah would say, remain patient. Hold on. Be patient. Until Allah divorces them. فَلَمَّا قَضَى مِنْهَا زَيْدٌ وَطَرًا زَوَّجْنَاكَهَا. Allah orders that divorce them. And then Rasulullah marries Zainab bin Jahsh. You all know the story. So what happens if you're married and you feel miserable? This does happen. Sometimes we think that the source of inspiration and happiness and joy and comfort within our life will come from family. Listen to me, please. I don't want you to misunderstand me. Before the family, before the marriage, before the relationship, before falling in love, before falling out of love, before whatever, the first source of security, harmony, happiness, and joy exists within you. Inside of you. Invest in yourself. Invest in yourself first. Feel good about yourself. Accept yourself. Your escape from loneliness doesn't come from your high school friends and your high school crush and getting married and your cousins and your parents and your family. It starts within you. That is why you have to invest in yourself. And then you may share happiness with others. One of the wrong reasons is I'm bored, I'm lonely, I want to get married. As soon as he also feels lonely in marriage, she feels lonely in marriage, well, guess what? It seems like this is the wrong marriage. No, the reason why you got married was the wrong reason. I've seen some of the young sisters, because they live in a traditional family, they want their freedom. So what do? They believe that through that marriage they'll gain their freedom. Not knowing that marriage is a much bigger commitment. Some people I've seen, and I have said this, marry for looks. We have a hadith, we have a riwayah. If you believe in Allah and you believe in Rasulullah, listen to this. مَنْ تَزَوَّجَ امْرَأَةً لِأَجْلِ جَمَالِهَا لَمْ يَرَ الْحَسْنَى. If your only reason to marry a woman is because of her beauty, you will not find happiness. I'm not saying beauty is not important, but there are things that come before beauty. They have to check first. Also we have a hadith, we have a riwayah. Man or woman that's married for the sake of money, this is the wrong reason. In fact, Allah says when you marry, Allah will give you rizq. Allah will give you rizq. Not your father-in-law. I speak to people. Tell them, why did you marry this young woman? We narrow it down until he confesses the truth. Say it, I married her because her father's money. I was actually saying the statement in a majlis, and I said, who would marry a woman for her dad's money? And one of the young brothers said, I will. We have to redefine this act of worship, which is marriage. And we get into it for the right reasons. Amongst the right reasons, brothers and sisters, is what I discussed in the beginning of the lecture. The greatest of reasons. Your source of inspiration to establish a family should be that you gift Imam al-Hussein. You gift the Imam of your time with servants. You say, my life, my time, my wealth, my health, everything that I have belongs to you, Ya Aba Abdullah. Belongs to you, Ya Sahib al-Zaman. And therefore this will continue in your lineage and your family. And this will ensure you happiness. This will ensure you joy. Nothing else. And this is why we gather. We gather and we read those stories about al-Banin and her children and Ahl al-Bayt so that we seek lessons from their life. Inshallah, we will continue tomorrow. Tonight, I want to take your hearts to Bab al-Hawaj, al-Banin, all the way to Baqi', to Medina, Allahu Akbar, where there is no one probably next to her grave. And if you stand in front of her graves, the enemies of Allah until today, they are there to repel you from the grave of al-Banin. But we send our hearts from here to Medina, to her son Abu al-Fadl Abbas, Bab al-Hawaj. Bishr ibn Hadlam reached the city of Medina. Imam Zain al-Abidin says to him, Ya Bishr, do you also know poetry like your father did? He says, yes. He says, go, wan'a Abi al-Hussein. Go inside Medina and form the people of Medina. He got into Medina. Allahu Akbar. يا أهل يثرب يا أهل يثرب لا مقام لكم بها لا مقام لكم بها ما الخبر الخبر عند قبر رسول الله. What has happened? Why can't we take and tolerate this news? He says, the news, I will give you the news next to the grave of Rasulullah. The people of Medina all gathered next to the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. He went and he stood in front of the grave and he called out one more time, Ya Ahl Yathrib, la muqama lakum biha. يا أهل يثرب لا مقام لكم بها قتل الحسين فأدمعي مدرار Hussein has been slain. Let us shed tears for Hussein. Where is Hussein? Hussein has been slain. Where is he? I'll tell you where he is. الجيش منه مقطعون بكربلاء. His body is cut into pieces and it's in Karbala. والرأس فوق الرمح and the head is on top of those spears, going from one city to another, from one village to another. Allahu Akbar. The people of Medina gathered, watching Alu Rasulullah, Alu Muhammad enter the city of Medina. We say to her, Ya al-Banin. We say to him, Ya Aba Abdullah. We say to him, Ya Aba al-Fadl. Tonight we gather and we all have our hajat. We have grand hajat. And we come and we put those hajat in front of your doors. We don't have any other door. We don't know any other door. We don't beg and plead any other place, but here we do. إِنَّا تَوَجَّهْنَا وَاسْتَشْفَعْنَا. All of us, brothers, sisters, wherever you are, even the ones watching at home. يا سيدتي يا أم البنين يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. All of us. يا وجيهة عند الله. يا وجيهة for those who have special hajat, and amongst our hajat is we want our name to be written amongst the Za'ireen of Ummul Baneen in Baqi', and amongst the Za'ireen of her sons Qamar al-Ashira, Saqi Atasha Karbala Abul Fadl Abbas. One more time, whoever has a haja with the loudest of your voice. يا وجيهة عند الله. She came, she knocked at the door of the house of Zainab. Zainab says to Fidda, I don't want any guests, please tell them to leave. We're not in a state where we can receive guests. She goes and she tells this woman, Sayyidah Zainab says, that I cannot accept guests. She says, I am no guest. Tell her I am Ummul Baneen. As soon as she hears, she says, let her in. She comes in, the first thing that she says, tell me about Hussein. So Sayyidah Zainab says, عظم الله لك الأجر بولدك جعفر. She says, I asked about Hussein, I didn't ask about Ja'far. عظم الله لك الأجر بولدك عبد الله. I didn't ask about my son Abdullah. What about Hussein? عظم الله لك الأجر بولدك عثمان. I didn't ask about Uthman. She was holding Abu al-Fadl's son. This is the traditions, they say this. Then Sayyidah Zainab says, عظم الله لك الأجر بولدك أبا الفضل. The son, this child fell from her hands. She could not stand. But she says, I beg you, please tell me of my son Hussein. She says, عظم الله لك الأجر بالحسين. Allahu Akbar. She calls out, wa walada, wa Husayna. Ya Rasul Allah, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, ilayka al-mushtaka. They say every day Ummul Baneen would stand and make a majlis and cry for Imam al-Hussein. Only Hussein. Every day she would cry for Hussein. One day Imam Zain al-Abidin told her, Ya Ummul Baneen, I don't see you crying li'ammi al-Abbas. He's your son, why don't you cry for him? She says, Ya Zain al-Abidin, Ali ibn al-Hussein, tell me what happened to my son Abbas. What did he do? What did my sons do in Ashura? Did they do what they're supposed to do? Am I going to be able to face their mother Fatima on the Day of Judgment proudly? Did they make me proud? She says, then Imam Zain al-Abidin says to her, when all the companions were slain, لما رأى السبط أصحاب الوفاء قتلوا نادى أبا الفضل أين الفارس البطل وأين أصحابي الذين بذلوا والله إن عادوا وإن رجعوا لأزرعن طريق الطاف ريحان. My father called Abu al-Fadl. He said, Ya Abu al-Fadl, do you hear the cries of the children? Al-Atash, Al-Atash. I want you to go and get them some water. Abu al-Fadl, being the commander of the army of Al-Imam al-Hussein, sat on the back of the horse. He went towards the Euphrates. The children are waiting, they're watching. Imam al-Hussein is telling them Abu al-Fadl is able to enter the Euphrates. Those cowards could not face him. Allahu Akbar. He goes into the Euphrates, he's thirsty to a point that the traditions tell us that when on the 10th of Muharram, Ahlul Bayt could no longer have a vision. They would see smoke because they were so thirsty. Imagine with that thirst, he enters the Euphrates, he puts his hand into the water, he's about to drink, but what happens? He's remembered who he is. He remembers who his brother is. Ya nafs, ya nafs min ba'd al-Hussein. يا نفس من بعد الحسين هوني. شباب صوتك يا نفس من بعد الحسين هوني وبعده ما كنت أن هذا الحسين وارد المنون وتشربين بارد المعين. الله أكبر. He puts the water back, he puts the water into the Euphrates, and then he fills out his bucket. He's marching back towards Imam al-Hussein. Allahu Akbar. The children are happy. They're no longer calling out Al-Atash, Al-Atash, because Abu al-Fadl, Saqi Atasha, Karbala, Babu al-Hawa'ij, is going back to them. Suddenly a man comes ambushing Abu al-Fadl and he amputates his right arm. Ayn al-Munadi wa Sayyidah. Wallahi only the ones that have hajat. If you don't have hajat, with Abu al-Fadl, Babu al-Hawa'ij, you may remain silent. But if you have a hajat tonight with Abu al-Fadl, to show your love for Abu al-Fadl, I want to hear you. Wallahi انقطعتم يميني إني أحامي أبداً عن ديني وعن إمام صادق اليقين نجل النبي الطاهر الأمين. He takes the water in his left, they ambush his left, they take away his left arm. Abu al-Fadl is standing, he's trying to put the bucket in his mouth. فأصابه سهم ذي 3 شعب في عينه فوقف لكي يستريح فأصاب سهما في القربة وجاءه ابن الطفل وضربه بالعمود على رأسه. أين المنادي وسيدا ومظلوما عمد الحديد بيت الدعاء وأسألكم الدعاء عمد الحديد بكربلاء خسف القمر من هاشم فلتبكي العليا مضاء فمشى إليه السبط ينعى كسار تلعن ظهري يا حبيب ومعيني. It is the time for dua. And inshallah, it is the time for ijabat al-dua. We raise our hands to the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as beggars to Him. We plead to Him. We ask Him. يا مجيب دعوة المضطرين يا كاشف كرب المكروبين يا غياث المستغيثين أغثنا يا أرحم الراحمين. نسألك اللهم وندعوك ونقسم عليك بأحب الخلق إليك محمد وعلي وفاطمة والحسن والحسين والتسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. فرج عنا يا الله. اللهم اغفر ذنوبنا، اللهم استر عيوبنا، اللهم شاف مرضانا، اللهم ارزقنا زيارة الحسين قريبا عاجلا وشفاعة الحسين آجلا. اللهم اجعلنا من الخدم المخلصين للإمام الحسين عليه السلام. Oh Allah, every man and woman present in this haja, present in this majlis with a haja, give them their hajat. We Allah, we ask you in the name of al-Fadl Abbas, those who are ill within our community, mu'mineen and mu'minat, shower onto them from your cure. Allah, the thawab of this majlis, we would like to gift it to the soul of all the marhumeen and those who carried the love of Imam al-Hussein. O Allah, we ask you to write our names amongst the visitors of Imam al-Hussein, amongst the servants of Imam al-Hussein. وعجل ثم عجل ثم عجل لمولانا الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديه وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والعلماء والشهداء وخدمة الحسين نهدي جميعا ثواب سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.